Well, good morning. Welcome to everyone to our webinar today about creating a customer-obsessed culture. I think it's probably one of those things that has not been more important than ever before, given what we're all going through. My name is Jerry Brown. I'm going to be your host throughout the next hour, and I have a great lineup of friends, and I say it's friends because I have actually met them all and know them. Firstly, and you'll see from your screens that we have three others joining us. Firstly, from BT, Nicola Millard. Many of you will have heard and seen her speak on many occasions, I'm sure. Then from Butternut Box, Harriet Treadwell, who's going to talk us through many of the challenges that Fido and Fluffy are currently having. And then Paolo Fabrizio from Italy, who clearly has been very involved and engaged in many of the challenges that are going on over there. So welcome, Paolo, and thank you for joining us. I think when we looked at the agenda, we had three key areas that we wanted to look at, and I think we don't want to deviate from that, but I think without thinking about what's going on today, what's going on in the world, it would be foolish of us not to discuss that. So what I wanted to start off with is just by asking our panelists a question about what they've seen change specifically over the last few weeks and days, because clearly lots has. And in particular, I was drawn by an infographic I saw on LinkedIn from BCG Institute, which talked about crises often leading to long-lasting changes. And they talked about three key areas of attitudinal shifts. One was under the heading of new policies. One was new ways of working, and one was new consumer behaviors. So I wanted to ask the panelists to sort of start off with from their own, what they're seeing, both within their own, I guess, their own personal life to a certain extent, but certainly from the business perspectives, what are they seeing from an attitudinal shift? And perhaps, Paolo, because of what's been going on in Italy for so long, perhaps I could invite you to start off and just let us know what you're seeing from where you sit.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I've got a pretty perspective living here in Milan, Italy. What I've seen in recent weeks is that especially two areas that you just mentioned, Barry, have been already involved by my clients and prospects, and I'm talking about the new ways of working and the new consumer behaviors. What we're observing, especially here in Italy, is a very strong increase in digital conversation volumes. Well, in order of plus 30% in 2 weeks, which is incredible. And so that a new challenge that many organizations are facing is to be able to deliver great customer service through digital channels such as messaging apps, social media, or live chat. So talking about a strong demand, and my view is that this strong demand by customers in terms of digital support is going to last. Is going to last even after the tsunami will be over. And I think also that after the tsunami, of course, my view is more local, concerned about Italy, the new normal will be different than before. So that from a consumer perspective, digital support will have a very strong increase in the forthcoming months as well, and it's going to stay. At the same time, the first impact organizations have been impacted is the new ways of working. I know many organizations and brands that already introduced remote working, smart working since 3 or 4 years ago, but I know maybe 60 or 70% of the rest, which started from scratch in 3 weeks. So they got a cultural shock, reallocating all the organization of their employees in 2 or 3 weeks, getting PCs, getting lines, dealing with colleagues without seeing each other in the same office or premises. So the new ways of working is the first impact, internal impact that I'm observing. At the same time, the external impact is customers and consumers pushing and knocking on brands' door in order to get faster and more efficient assistance now more than ever, now in this very particular and emotional period. And of course, I see also the first block you mentioned, which is new policies, but I think that new policies will come and follow accordingly in the forthcoming weeks for the quickest, in the forthcoming months for the slowest ones.
Yeah. Great. I think you're right. And I think it's interesting how quickly organizations have been able to mobilize the troops to get things done in this time when some time ago we were told, oh, we can't do that for the next 6 months. Perhaps I can now go to Nicola, because while I know that you're not directly from a BT perspective, I know you're not directly involved in some of these things that are working out, but I thought your view, because I know you speak very effectively and articulately about things like, where AI can fit and where these things work. And I know the whole way of working that you've been following for many years. So from your viewpoint, and perhaps slightly from a BT perspective, how are you seeing things play out?
So yeah, I mean, I'm part of BT's innovation team. So to be honest, a lot of the thing, and I also lead on both the digital workplace or new ways of working, and also on the consumer behaviour stuff. So hence, I've been quite busy over the past few weeks. So I mean, I think firstly on the consumer behaviour stuff, I guess obviously we've been doing a lot of research on consumer behaviour for many years. In fact, it's our 10th anniversary of our autonomous customer research now. And I think the consumer behaviours we were seeing pre-COVID-19 are pretty much being played out in this weird period at the moment. In that we are certainly seeing a big rise in audio calls. So people are ringing contact centres, and I've said for a long time that when we're in crisis, often the phone, it's not new, it's not sexy, but it's reliable. And for people that are emotional and need support and need reassurance, actually the phone is an incredibly good channel. So that's been one thing that the contact centers have been having to cope with. And obviously what they're trying to do is then shift people very rapidly onto digital channels. And I think to a certain extent it has worked. But again, the research has been pointing towards the fact that sometimes the digital channels don't offer the customer experience that customers want or are expecting, and hence they often then need to basically go back onto the audio side again. So the phone still plays a very big part, even if we are trying to shift people onto digital. I think by necessity people are understanding that the phone channels are busy. There are pressures on the contact centers. I think people are trying the digital channels maybe more than they would. There's a higher tolerance there, but I do still think the phone channel is still playing a very, very big part on that. And obviously video is starting to take off. To be honest, I've been talking about video for about 25 years, and it's always been the next big thing. And I think it's been interesting to see, this sudden hike in us doing, family video conferencing. I'm still not convinced it's translating into B2C. Right. So I'm not sure there's a huge demand into sort of video contact, really, apart from some niche areas, healthcare being the big boom one. Sure. And we are seeing a lot, certainly within our health sector clients, of people saying, yeah, give me video, because I actually, if I can talk to a doctor remotely or a nurse remotely, brilliant, I'm not exposing them to any danger. And on the nurse and doctor side, they're saying, well, actually we don't really want to be exposed either. So I think there's some interesting stuff going there that's driving a lot of this new ways of working. And I think absolutely right, that the home-based contact center, I mean, I keep saying BT first tried home-based contact center advisors back in well, it was actually 1992. That was our original experiment with contact center advisors, called the Inverness experiment. We had 11 operators working from home. So we'd proved it then, but I think now with lovely technologies like cloud, for example, there is that ability to actually work anywhere. And we've been saying that for a long time. It's just a crisis tends to mobilize people really fast. But I think the issues we have been seeing is around, agents having a home, having an appropriate space in home, having the appropriate hardware, because often they don't have laptops. So actually having to source that and, create the ability to change the way people are working. I think it's got really big strategic mobilization behind it. It's just sometimes the practicalities can be difficult.
Well, I think that's what people have found in a lot of areas, and it's interesting you mentioned, video. the first video phone demonstration was the New York's World Fair in 1939. So it's taken a little while. I don't actually remember that. People may think I do, but those things. It is interesting, isn't it? Where a lot of this stuff isn't new, but we've clearly decided that it is time to do this. And I think what's interesting, again, thinking about the original agenda that we were talking about, that I think this will have clearly a role to play in talking about how to train agents and engage and retain customers by delivering a personalized service, because doing it from other locations in many ways might be more positive. Giving them the ability to work from home, even if we don't have a crisis, I think is a positive thing. But also, I think it applies to the cultural side of things. Giving people options in how they work in an organization is also going to have a positive effect. So we'll have to see. Now, recognizing that what this has done to us is obviously caused us to be home a lot more. And being home a lot more means being with our pets a lot more. Harriet, what are you finding in terms of the sort of, if you like, the pressures or the demands it's putting on your organization to make sure that our lovely friends have sufficient nutrition?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So for us, obviously, demand has been huge still for, if anyone doesn't know, we sell dog food, and it's fresh dog food on subscription delivered every couple of weeks to your home. So for us, I mean, we were fairly well set up for this kind of crisis to actually hit. So not that obviously it's a good thing at all. We actually had to stop all of our marketing spend to stop customers coming in the door, basically, because we haven't got enough production facility to be able to supply that many people. So we've seen a lot of people started to stockpile for about 2 weeks, but over the past kind of 10 days, that's really flattened out. And I just think that most of that comes from obviously worry, the unknown. So we kicked into gear very, very quickly with our digital product and our communications. So within the space of a week, we changed, we put new banners on the homepage, we created new help center articles, we were firing out proactive emails every other day, and also like sending out videos on how to be able to change things within your online account, how best to contact us. We completely revamped our how to get in touch page with the most common questions, with directing people to our live chat function or to our help center to self-serve. So within the space of a week, we were really, really quick to deflect and help our customers get the information they needed without having to pick up the phone. So in saying that, we actually, it started hitting last week, 0 inboxes every day last week, and we saw comms just dramatically drop. And we've even been sending out proactive communications to offer NHS and key worker staff discount on their boxes, and various other things that we've been trying to do. We even set up a new Facebook page as well called For the Love of Dogs, which is just good dog content, which is what everyone needs at this time. So I think we're in a very fortunate position, though, that we were set up well for this time. We all have our own individual laptops. We did a lot more working from home as standard, but being a startup, that's naturally where we were anyway. Everything is on a cloud for us. We use cloud-based phone systems, CRM systems, so it really hasn't been that much of a change, and if anything, we've seen productivity for our team members actually really improve, and that's helped to stay in communication and getting onto that kind of like customer obsessed culture. We're still doing so much stuff together as a team, so we have a morning meeting every day at 9 a.m. I was just saying to you guys before, our people team this morning all dressed up as members of the show from Tiger King on Netflix, if anyone's seen it, and did a little run through of that, which was very surreal. But we have other things, like we have team yoga at 12 o'clock. We communicate via channels such as Jam, Slack. If anyone hasn't heard of Jam, it's basically like it's like WhatsApp but with videos, so you just send each other videos. So we do a lot of that, of like what we're having for lunch, we do like cribs tours, so keeping it really personal still, and making sure we've onboarded 4 new people as well in the last 2 weeks, just to make sure that they feel like part of the team, and people can see them and we can see them. So it's, yeah, all around been quite good for us.
Well, I think everyone, as when these things happen, we're all trying to find positives out of this, and I think we're seeing much of that. Let me just mention before I go to my next point, if any of you have any questions for our panelists, please pop them in the chat window, and we'll do our best to get to them. So hopefully you'll have some questions based on what we've heard so far. And what Harriet was saying about people coming together and doing things more in a much more collaborative and community way. We've been inundated with stories about the heroes and villains of customer service and business in general. And I'm not gonna call out anyone, but I think we know that the airlines, the banking and utility industries in some respects, as well as some retail examples, have not exactly behaved in the way that we might like. And I'm wondering whether or not this time around, and I say this time, will people remember how various companies have acted, and the fact that in many cases, good behavior for some has to be mandated. There's been lots of stories, and again, I'm not going to try and trot them all out, but I think we've seen many people acting in a great way, and it sounds, Harriet, that things you're doing are very, getting your people together and obviously playing that back out to your customers. But what do we think in terms of how people will respond if, and I say if, but when this is all over? Will we just forget all those companies that didn't treat us particularly well, and the ones that did, or will we really make sure that we think about that before we do business with them? Paolo, what do you think from your perspective?
Well, I always try to see things through from the customer's lens. And especially in this very emotional period, I think that most of consumers will remember those who excelled, who really delivered badly. And after this terrible period, they will still feel the same feeling, and they will remember and they will award those who were really helpful, not just deliver good customer service, but went beyond customer service and try to help people before talking about customers. So I think that the human aspect in customer service in these specific times is crucial in order to strengthen or weaken the relationships with customers. Because I'm also a customer, of course, and I'm observing, not just as consultant, how the brands I have relationships with are dealing with me. Some of them have changed approach, and they've become more human, more helpful. They help me using more self-service options for me, so that I can avoid trying to get in touch with call centers or other contact options. And so they make my life easier. Okay, and I think this approach will really pay off today, and even more in the future. Others just went on doing the same things they used to do. Yes. So they were focused on their internal KPIs instead of being focused on external emotions. And I think this is not a good choice. Not just for myself, but talking with many different industries and brands, I see how people react, since there are so many public channels online today where you can look and see consumers' reactions. So I especially work on assessments on social media and online review sites, and I've seen so many different reactions by consumers in the last 3-4 weeks. So I definitely think that today it's the human, the emotional aspect is important. So the brands will be able to be helpful, who will be not just effective but also helpful and human, will build a solid ground for the future. Those who just relied on what they used to do, or didn't realize that they need to be more externally focused on people's emotions and needs, now I think they're bound to miss the bus, not today but in the forthcoming months.
Well, I think you're right, and I think you've all expressed a strong alignment with the digital side of the business. And I think one of the topics that we had on our agenda was the ability to enrich agent customer interactions with AI insights. And I think that what Nicola alluded to, and certainly Harriet mentioned in terms of how they've adapted to us, demonstrates that recognizing that whilst phone calls will be very vital at this time, with the increased demand, if we can make that digital experience, that self-service experience, that much better, so that people can actually get served that way and so on, then I think we take a little of the pressure off. We provide some of those answers via the digital medium, whether that's via AI or whatever method it is. And then when we do need to move that over to a real person, if that's where it goes, the customer perhaps has had some of their questions answered and feels much better about the thing. So I think the organizations that do start to really focus on that, as Harriet mentioned, I think is important. So I think, just again, your comments, Nicola, on how I think we heard how quickly organizations have mobilized in many cases. What do you think has helped them do that? Because I think we all know that, you go to some websites and you're trying to get help and they have some very static FAQs and it really doesn't help much, and therefore you end up calling. What have you seen organizations do to significantly upgrade or enhance their digital experience?
Well, I think, I mean, the research bears out a lot of what Paolo was saying, and I think a lot of customers are acting like this on steroids. So at the moment, easy is absolutely imperative, and you won't be surprised that I'm going to mention that, because I've been waffling on about easy for a very long time. So it's 3 in 4 customers in our autonomous customer survey were saying they buy more from companies that make it easier to do business with. Now, I think this is an interesting one. So if we look at the pressure, for example, in the UK that the supermarkets have been coming under, the big boys are actually struggling a little bit because of the loads on the demand and the load on both their actual stock, their stores, and also their digital stores. And it's quite interesting that a lot of people have turned to a lot smaller retailers and actually more local retailers as well. So certainly I've kind of given up on the big supermarkets because you can't get a slot. But yet some of the local producers will give you, very easy access to slots and very good quality produce. So I think, that some of the bigger companies are going to have to really look at, obviously this is a crisis, so we'll be a little bit forgiving, but around how do we make it much easier and build the resilience into the system to help customers get what they need. We've got 41% of customers saying they've stopped using a brand because of poor customer experience. So our expectation of customer experience is still pretty high, and I think that applies now as well, that bad experiences are still being punished. If we can't get what we want, we will very, very easily switch. So again, don't forget the customer experience during a time of crisis. It's incredibly important. Only 21% in the survey rated digital customer experiences as excellent. So generally the digital experience isn't doing terribly well. Now that could be because of high expectations of it, but absolutely, as you said, Jerry, endless FAQs that don't really help does not happen. It doesn't actually not deliver necessarily what customers want. So so I think that there are a number of things there, but I think one of the really interesting things, and it sort of creates an intersection between my 2 areas of research, which is around both customer experience and employee experience, is that actually some of the brands are being vilified because of the way that they've been treating their employees as well as their customers. So I'm not going to mention any brands, but the ones that just sacked their employees or haven't been giving them proper PPE or haven't been social distancing them sufficiently in the contact center, that's coming out. And again, I think people are sort of saying, well, if they don't treat their employees well, I'm not going to do business with them either. So I think there's a lot of really quite interesting things going on. Now, in terms of the digital experience, I mean, AI absolutely does play a part, and AI has a lot to do with demand management, whether that's outbound, so trying to figure out what customers need or want and pushing messages out, as Harriet said, be proactive, actually push stuff out, and you can use AI to do that, to try and sort of personalize and become much more proactive. And then there's the chatbot, which again, we basically, when we looked at things like chatbots, there's a lot of hype out there. I think there was a lot of expectation that chatbots were going to completely revolutionize the customer experience. 73% of customers 2 years ago were saying they thought it was going to do that. Now 58% of customers are saying that, because I think sometimes the chatbot experience isn't that good, or it's been inappropriately deployed, and then even worse if it's then disconnected from the human experience. So
Right.
I keep saying it's all about trying to triage the customer, solve the problem if you possibly can through AI and automation, but actually if you can't, make sure you route it to the agent with the right skills, who can then pick up hopefully seamlessly on that conversation. So it does have a part to play, automation in a crisis, absolutely, but it's got to be deployed appropriately.
Well, I think this is probably a good time for people to figure that out, because as you point out, if you simply, the way I put it is that the worst thing that could happen is that we get IVR 2.0 or whatever it is, and we just go down another horrible rat trap of endless blocked routes. So I think making sure, as you point out, that we, the information that the customers already shared. I mean, this seems obvious, but as you know, that people don't do this. The information that people have already shared with a chatbot or whatever system you're using, that goes to the agent, that we don't just ask all the same questions. All of these things that seem obvious, but many businesses don't seem to be able to make that happen.
Absolutely right. And I call chatbots IVR for digital, by the way. So I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn.
We're on the same page. As a segue, interestingly enough, and I'll ask Harriet to comment on this, we have a question from the audience, and what they're saying is, with the majority of agents working remotely at the moment, what metrics are you using to measure performance? And are the metrics as important during this time, or do they play second fiddle to customer sentiment? Now, Harriet, I don't know how many people you have working remotely, but perhaps you could, if you want to comment on that and what you're seeing in terms of how, I mean, clearly I know from the way you do business that you see the world very differently. You're not driven only by metrics, but how are you seeing this? Because I think obviously we want to make sure we're handling as many customers as we possibly can and well. So how are you seeing metrics being used at this time?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'm not the the best person to ask in this situation. Like you just said, we do things, I would say, fairly differently, in that we don't look at a lot of things like, handle time and how many calls someone's taken in an hour and that kind of thing. But we do look very much at the qualitative data. So for us, the main things that we're kind of tracking at the moment, first and foremost, is eNPS, so employee NPS, and how well our team members are enjoying their time at work still. So we just reached an eNPS of 86 across the business, which, as you guys know, is pretty damn high. So that's probably the most important thing for us. And it's mainly that focus of, if our team members are happy, then our customers are more than likely going to be happy as well. And then looking at our CSAT scores and reviews. So again, it's still really qualitative data there of, if we are still getting really, really high customer service scores, then that means that whatever we are doing, even if our first response time might be higher, it might be a bit lower, as long as our CSAT scores are still really high and really good, and the feedback is still coming in really good, that's our main focus. The biggest thing in my mind right now is to not put pressure on my team when they have their own kind of anxieties and questions around what's going to happen. But I think the key there as well is the internal leadership and confidence from your directors, from yourselves, from CEOs. Like our co-founders, they send 2 emails every week just around confidence of the business, and just, nobody's going to lose their jobs. We're all in this together. So we can really just focus on the task at hand rather than having all these external worries. And I've spoken to lots of other people that they haven't had that reassurance and confidence from leadership, which I think is a real worry. And as Nicola was saying, if people are being vilified for the way that they're treating their employees, I think it's really important that your employees are actually advocates for the way that your company has dealt with the crisis. If they're talking to friends, family on different forums, it's super important that they feel that everything that we're doing as a company is in their best interests. And we definitely feel that at my work as well.
Well, I think you've nailed it in terms of how that should be done, and I think it talks to the second of our subjects that we were talking about, about the overhauling the corporate culture of the contact center. Metrics are important, but customer service agents need to have a strong grip on the skills necessary to make a customer feel valued, and of course, vice versa. And I think the sort of the second part of the earlier question about how businesses will be perceived is how people that work for business that haven't acted with integrity will view their role and their ability, because they want to do a great, they want to do it the right thing. People generally, I've said this many times, people that work in contact centers or in customer service generally, don't get up in the morning and say, right, I wonder how many people I can upset today. They really do go in and want to do a great job, but quite often they're restricted by whether it's poor systems, whether it's a lack of the support that you mentioned, Harriet, or whether it's simply things that the organization just isn't seen as one that does the right thing. And I wanted to sort of link this now to a sort of a question that I started to I guess I asked in a different way earlier on. There's a writer in the UK called Rod Little. He writes for the Sunday Times, both a comment column and also in the sports pages. And I wanted to just quote what he said in the paper on Sunday. And I wanted to quote it because he has a very irreverent way of looking at the world and adds a little bit of a shot to it. He says, is that right now our companies, large and small, will be examining their vast and deserted offices and the enormous bills for their maintenance, heating, and upkeep, and wondering what on earth is the point of the office anymore? They had used once these desolate areas of parched pot plants and plywood cubicles, patrolled by middle managers forever calling fatuous meetings, often involving PowerPoint presentations in order to ameliorate their own crushing insecurities. Now, as you see, he takes his own view of it, but I guess the point I'm going to ask is that Nicola would have, I know she's been talking about this for some time. We've been hearing about the death of the contact center or the death of the call center or whatever we want to call it these days. And while I don't think, quoting Mark Twain, I think the reports of its death have been exaggerated. Do we think that this will play out in a way that many businesses, for perhaps some of the wrong reasons, we don't need to have that big building, we can sell that and save some money. Do we think it will actually create a major sea change in the way that organizations look at their customer care and their customer care operations? Nicola, what do you think about that?
Well, as you know, I've been talking about this for a very long time, and I always say offices are very interesting places in that I don't think they're going to go away, but I do think their function is changing. And their function is really, I keep calling them collaboration tools. They're places we go to socialize about work rather than necessarily do work. And I think with the contact center, it's an interesting one. Historically, the reason we centralized contact centers were partially, it was about scale, so we could very easily train people and recruit people, and with the high churn in many contact centers as well, that's a big priority. But actually they start to very rapidly form a social network, and I'm not talking Facebook and Twitter here. I'm talking about people just simply building friendships and building social circles. And actually, because contact center work especially can be quite stressful, that's a really valuable function. So I mean, that's easy to do face to face, and I think increasingly as kind of technology has developed, and actually the need to have a centralized switch which you hang people off has also disappeared into the cloud, that sort of rationale as to having a physical building does start to be questioned a little bit more. And obviously there are a lot of organizations that have been working with either exclusively or partially home-based advisors for a long time. So we know technology actually can support it. It's not the technology that's the problem. It is completely the culture. And that culture is one of things like trust. So do I trust people to work? Now, that's a weird question for contact centers, because actually it's one of the best jobs in terms of visibility, because frankly, if you do want to monitor your agents, you can see them on the switch, you can listen to what they're saying, you can monitor pretty much if they're breathing. So that's not necessarily, it's not a trust thing. They're going to be working because you can hear them. I think there are questions around the typical youthfulness of the workforce. What we find in our research prior to COVID-19 is that younger people tended to want to be in an office more than older people. And the rationale there was largely for home working to work, you need a home. And I think at the moment, I was talking to one of our graduates the other day who was literally working off an ironing board in a 1-bedroom apartment. That's not ideal. So, you know, and we're just about to release some research from our home workers saying, you know, you do need a good chair, you do need good equipment, you do need a good headset. So let's make sure we get people that, because they're going to be more effective working from home. And then there's the security angle, which we mustn't play down, because of course, you know, a lot of us are handling customer data. Now, some of that's already, you know, with GDPR and you know, all of that stuff. A lot of it's kind of been covered, but I think again there is that sort of sensitivity around, well, can other people see screens, or is customer data, you know, becoming insecure? Again, you know, those are solutions that you can solve. A lot of people have already. You can also put a lot of guidelines in for your employees, but a lot of this is around, you know, culture. And as we've all been saying, you know, culture has shifted very rapidly. And to be honest, I think a lot of people are going to be standing back and going, well, do I need my contact centers being big buildings with lots of people in, or do I bring people in occasionally, or rotate people round and have a slightly smaller office that serves more a social function than necessarily a work function?
I think that you know, that last point is, you know, that's kind of where I see it potentially going. I think you're absolutely right, and anyone that's spent any time in a contact center will know that there is a tremendous social aspect to that. You know, I've never been in a place where there are so many donuts and things on offer, which is great. But you know, but I mean, that's to me just as natural. We are naturally social beings, so I think that's important. But I think on the issue of trust, it's a very good point. My point about this has always been that most people that are given the opportunity to remote work, and whether that's home or somewhere else, recognize, especially if they were single mothers, or if they're disabled, or if there's some reason that they can't get to an office, I think they recognize they've been given a tremendous opportunity to contribute. And the chances of them messing that up are very, very slim. So I think, you know, the trust issue shouldn't be there. And frankly, if you don't trust your people, you've got a bigger problem to work on.
Absolutely.
So right. I think, you know, there's more to it than that. Paolo, from again, culturally speaking, you know, Italy being a different country, and knowing how, you know, I think we've heard how important socializing is in Italy. What do you think of that? You know, will we see that happen over there more so? Do you think people are more likely to go, right, okay, let's totally stop this, or do we see, as Nicholas said, the need to continue to have that interaction?
Well, I think that especially here in Italy, we will still see the need to have interactions. We're social and emotional beings, here in
Yes.
Italy, about 60 million people. But the way we will have our socialization will change, I think, forever. So I'm talking with clients who are already still reorganizing the internal layouts of offices, thinking, in advance about, when the employees will come back to the offices, regardless it's a traditional customer service, small one, or a big call center, because they are already thinking about that maybe the physical distance between one employee and the other were going to be changed forever. And at the same time, I know some friends and colleagues and clients that have started working remotely 3 or 4 years ago, those who especially work for, international multinational brands. But just to give you numbers, 97% of Italian brands are small brands with less than 10 people working there.
Wow.
So you can imagine how this cultural shift has a very strong impact to change, because they didn't even think about remote work. But even
right.
in larger ones with 100 or 200 employees, I've heard from HR managers still and up until few months ago that they want to see people coming and checking how they really work. It's sort of, visual control, which is a very old-fashioned and old cultural approach. While other brands that already introduced remote work, and I got friends that really enjoyed their once or twice a week working from home. No, I mean, those ones have enjoyed an increase in terms of productivity. So this is for the internal thing. Another important aspect that I want to mention is the internal communication that need to be changed. I talked with a client 2 hours ago, and he told me that he calls every day 2 or 3 employees, you know, beyond the digital conversation, just making a phone call to his managers, to the line of his managers, in order to make sure they're doing well physically, emotionally, not just for work. So he just there are some brands that already start, you know, reorganizing the way they have internal communications. And as very well Nicola mentioned earlier, if we treat our employees, our co-workers, our managers well, and we let them feel motivated, even though there is a physical distance, but we don't have to create an emotional distance, they will still deliver a great job. And delivering a great job, you know, comes to the very end, which is the front line agents. I prefer to call them digital conversation specialists in terms of training and skills. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And so that this is going to have a strong impact internally and externally. Internally, we need to rearrange all the internal communications, the way we get in touch, not just in terms of tools we use, how often, what's the reason why I want to talk to you, okay? And externally, in this particular period where large volumes of incoming calls, incoming chats, and digital conversations, self-service, I think, is crucial. Building or strengthening self-service options like help pages, including knowledge bases, FAQs, other informations, all over our digital presence in order to let our customers get the information or the answers they're looking for without needing to make the effort to get in touch with us. And we know, especially here, that it's pretty hard now to get in touch over a call center in Italy here, or you need to receive a late response or delayed response on other digital channels due to the high volume and pressure on customer service. And proactivity. So talking about agents, when they have to answer, they need to think about the next following questions and to prevent that. So to give information, to give links, to give content, just not stopping answering or just think about answering, but thinking about what the customer might think or do or ask after my questions. So,
and I think that's a very good point, Paolo. Sorry to interrupt. It's a very good point in terms of we think about the first element of our agenda when we talk about, you know, what training and soft skills your customer service agents need to showcase your brand. And I think this is one of the perfect ones you've mentioned. If we want to, it's all well and good to answer a question and, you know, well, and of course, as Nicola mentioned, you know, make it easy. But if we also have a follow-up question that is related to experiences that we've had with other customers who have had to call back or come back in because they didn't get an answer to the question. So being able to train, and that's maybe not even the right word, I think it's educate people into knowing what other things might a customer ask. You can certainly do it in a very polite way. You know, Mr. Jones, if, many of our customers who've had this issue also found they need to know about such and such. And being able to offer that information in a polite and courteous way, I think has a tremendous impact on how the agent themselves perform. And it also, I think, looking at one of the questions from the audience, which relates to something that Harriet was saying, it says moving customers to a new digital smart experience in terms of proactive reach out. What worked really well and what failed? It sounds like most things have worked for you, Harriet, but were there any things that you tried or have tried that has not worked quite as well?
I'm just trying to think if there's anything that because I mean, it's all been very quick on our proactive reach out. I think matching like the digital product to whatever the email is saying. So we've just launched actually it's completely separate to anything coronavirus, but a tap to unwrap birthday gift for your dog. So when it's your dog's birthday month, you get an email that says, tap here and log into your account and we'll add a gift to your next box. So that you do that, but nothing actually happens inside the account. We know that the customer has done it and they're going to get a gift, but then we got a lot of emails come back of like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I guess like mapping out a full journey of, if you're going to say something to a customer, that they can visually see it and feel like you've done what you said you were going to do as well, which is definitely key. I just wanted to touch on as well what Paolo was just saying about having agents at home specifically. So we never call them agents. We never use the words contact center or anything like that at our company. We use team members and customer love team. And if you're thinking about having a lot more people at home, I think it's really important that we do still have an office and a space. What we don't want to do is still silo customer service even more than it kind of already has been over the years. So I think it's really important to keep it together. And if it's something that a lot of people enjoy working from home, we've got to ask ourselves why they enjoy working from home. What are the creature comforts at home that you don't have in the office? So things like popping sofas around your office, having space for you to just chill out, changing your dress code. Maybe it's people might not turn up in their pajamas like they do at home, but just relaxing a dress code that you don't have to put a suit on every day. Things like, so we have provisions lockers at work. So we have like a men's one and a women's one. So in the women's one, you've got like deodorant, you've got hair straighteners, you've got dry shampoo, you've got so much stuff that you just kind of like usually have at home. And like not being hard on your team as well. If any of my team want to get up and go for a wander, go for a coffee, or just pop outside, or whatever they want to do, we're not hard on that, as long as we can see, again, like quality of data is fine. They're engaged still, they're getting a number of conversations done every day. We're not tough on anyone that works there, which in turn means that our attrition rates are really, really low, and like I said, our eNPS is really high. So I think being able to ask your team, if they are enjoying working from home, what specifically are they enjoying about working from home, and try and bring that back to the office with you.
No, that's great. I think you the way that you operate and the trust that you put in your employees, as I was saying earlier, I think you really created that. It's a customer obsessed culture based on an employee obsessed culture, which is what Nicola was talking about. The whole idea of these, you cannot separate employee engagement, employee experience, whatever you want to call it, and customer experience. Those two things absolutely, or three things, go hand in hand. And I think you're demonstrating, how well that works. And to Paolo's point, it's the smaller organizations, and Nicola mentioned this earlier as well about the supermarkets. I think these are the ones that are really going to see a difference. I also live in a fairly small village, and a lot of the shopping that I have to do, I'm going into my local butcher, and I was already doing it anyway. But seeing the way that they're responding, seeing the way that the greengrocer is responding, it's a real treat. And you think, well, this is just, why wouldn't this be everywhere? And so I think what you've described is exactly the way that we really want to treat our people, and encourage and engage them is the key word here. Another question that we've gotten, it sort of aligns a little bit with what we're saying, what you're mentioning about some of the things you're doing. It says, from a sales perspective, is it a good time to push products or not in this time of crisis? Rather, perhaps we should be pushing the brand and doing that. I know that word brand is a strong word sometimes, but pushing the brand, sort of being a personal being, we want to help you. So I just want, what are your thoughts on that, Nicola? I see, that we've been hearing that people are saying we should stop advertising for gambling companies. Does that mean we should stop all advertising and not, in other words, I'd love it if we stopped all advertising, frankly, but that's, it's a whole other webinar. What are your feelings about how we should or shouldn't push product, or should we be pushing our brand as a caring organization?
Well, yes, absolutely. But I think, this again is a continuum of what we've been seeing before. It's just kind of intensified it. So, firstly, customers like personalized service, so they don't want irrelevant stuff. And it's around trying to understand who the customer is, what they're likely to want to know, what messages are likely to hit them. Is it going to help?
Yes.
And particularly in a time of crisis, you're being hit by multiple irrelevant messages that basically clog up what is already a very busy and anxious mind. Probably doesn't work very well. So, you know, it is really around personalizing that experience. Going back to the proactive bit, I mean, the research we've just done has said 74% of people have said, I like it when organizations notice I've been having difficulty with a website or completing an order and contact me. You know, so it is around recognize who I am, recognize what I want. If you see I'm struggling, help me. And then of course you can start to kick in AI and algorithms and start to become a little bit more predictive, which, you know, that can get a bit creepy. But again, if it's appropriate, you know, what's this customer like? Okay, well, what are they likely to need? Absolutely. But it's got to be a relevant message, and that is all about personalization ultimately.
I think we'd all prefer that than the ubiquitous thing that pops up immediately. We hit a website and ask if we will complete a survey. You know, I think that's what we dislike. I think you're absolutely right. It's like walking into a store. When you went to a physical store, if somebody actually, you know, we may have trouble remembering what that was like, but when we do that, someone that actually says in a you know, way that is not focused, but if they see someone, you know, that clearly is looking for something, you know, can I direct you to the right place? Because just asking if you can help probably is not the best thing, but, you know, can I direct you to, you know, the right department, something like that. You know, no one would say no to that. And I think it's the same thing in this example. So I think, you know, what we're seeing is very much that ability, or helping people have that ability to do that. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I'm just going to just go back again to Paolo on the, I guess, the question of both on the digital experiences and what you're seeing in terms of, you know, what's working, what's not working. And I guess it is kind of tied into whether we should be pushing product, because I think to a certain extent we're seeing some of this. I think most people are reacting very well. They're prepared to help people buy, you know, whether it's free this or free that, which I think is all really good. But at the back of that, I mean, the cynics among us might be thinking, oh, well, it's free now, but, you know, will it be free in a few months? So, you know, Paolo, what do you think about how we sort of move people to the digital, and what are the things that we're learning, and what are we doing well and not so well?
Talking about sales in this period of crisis, you mean, Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I will answer from two different standpoints. The external one, the one I'm observing, and the one I'm living as consultant, because I needed to rearrange part of my activities in the last 3 weeks. So starting from what I'm observing right now is that I've seen that some brands stop doing advertising. Some others kept on doing advertising and trying to sell. Some didn't change anything, and, you know, they were just pushy. I think that the thing that brands need to avoid in this specific period is being pushy, not avoiding to do sales, because doing sales is meaning that to the customers you're still alive and kicking, you're still able to provide help with your products or services. So I think you know the message needs to be changed. You don't have to stop selling. You just need to avoid being pushy and to arrange the message you're delivering. So while you try to sell a message, before talking about the service of the product, tell me about what's useful for me, and then maybe you can talk about the service of the product. This is a way of content marketing that, you know, some brands have already adopted in recent weeks, but, you know, not so often, as far from my own perspective here in Italy. And from my personal standpoint, I as a consultant, since I usually move physically to clients all over Italy and sometimes also abroad, you know, I had a very emotional day on March 11, where I received maybe 25 emails saying, oh, we stopped doing things, you cannot come anymore, everything is stopped, we cannot do, you know, workshops, we cannot do consulting. So I had quite an emotional crisis on that day, I remember. But, you know, the following day, what I thought and acted is that I just needed to rearrange part of my consultancy and training activity as for digital customer services online, not stopping selling. So what I'm doing also, after working on the products which are already ready, is not stop talking about my services, is not being pushing and telling, using social media, my website and my blogs, what can you do if you use a training, a consultancy, a digital customer service you may opt. And that's it, and not, you know, talking about it every day. So I think that as for even small brands, I got a very nice patisserie. Okay, that's the French name. I don't know how in English, if it sounds, you know, for, you know, sweet cakes, tarts, and very, very tasty things that I like, especially as we get closer to Easter time. And they were just, you have a small shops, no online services, no website, and in a couple of weeks they built up a website site, and they leased 2 or 3 small vans, and they started doing deliveries, because everything is still closed now except as for supermarkets. So they're officially closed, but you know, their oven is still open. Okay, so they work and bake very tasty cakes, and now they're able to sell through WhatsApp. So no advertisement, they just let them customers know through their Instagram account, where they used to promote their and to show off their wonderful cakes, and they're doing a great job. So they need to reinvent themselves, not stop selling without being pushy.
Well, I think that's the key. I think what we're seeing is what you've said, people are reinventing themselves, and I think actions are speaking louder than pushy words. So the fact that people are doing the right thing in their own way, while still providing a service, is showing people that they can, you know, still operate in this world. We have just a couple of minutes left. What I'd like to do is just the last question, and just pose this to Nicola and Harriet. About what do you do to keep agents motivated and positive? We've already, you know, we've seen, you know, things that we need to do. I think what we're, you know, recognizing that. Are there any other things that we need to do, Nicola, just to keep them really engaged and involved, as long as it, and I agree with Harriet, not necessarily calling the agents, we're using that as a common term, but what do you think about what we can do to keep them motivated?
I think communication is key, and again, that's come out in not just contact center agents. Everybody needs to. It's all about connection and communication. So, in terms of leaders, you know, talk to your teams, talk to them constantly, make sure they're okay, tell them what's going on, and then within teams, you know, talk to each other, and that's where things like social media comes in. And I loved what Harriet was saying, and some of the things they're doing within their teams. That's exactly right. You know, have fun, connect. You know, just use the tools. And we've been seeing for a long time contact center and unified communications coming together, and I think it's really starting to work now, in that, you know, people can connect more than they maybe. I mean, had we done this, you know, 30 years ago, we would have been a lot more isolated. Now we have so many tools for collaboration. Just use them, you know, connect, communicate.
Well, I think that is what's making the difference right now, is being able to do that. So, Harriet, you have the last word on this. If you want to just, if you've got anything else.
Yeah, I think there's also a really important time to be driving insight and customer feedback back into the business. Now more than ever, it is so important for all the other teams in your business to be hearing what your customer service agents have to say, what your customers are saying, and listening to that feedback and making quick, snappy changes. And on the fun side of it, we play games every morning, so people come up with games, and you can be your home self at work when you're remote working. So encouraging, the things we say the most are get weird and stay weird. So I will leave you with that.
The Zappos approach.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and I think actually that really nicely ends it off, because the last part of that last question was, it says metrics traditionally have been used as a stick, but we are looking to create a positive culture and use incentives and coaching to improve performance. And I think what you've just said, and what Nicola was talking about, and what Paolo was talking about reinvention, I think that's how we're doing it. And communication, as we're trying to do today, I think is absolutely vital. So we have come to the top of the hour. I'm sensitive to people taking the time out today to listen to us. I hope you agree. We got some wonderful ideas and new ways of doing things from our panelists. I hope we did our best to adhere to the original schedule and float many of those things through. So thank you for all of those that participated. And if you do have colleagues that didn't have a chance to participate or listen in, the session is being recorded, and I think information will be sent out to you on how you can do that. So thank you once again to Nicola, to Harriet, and Paolo, and let's all keep on talking.